So Craig, thanks for joining us. 18 months in as WADA President, how are you pleased with the progress that's been made?
Oh, I think lots of things have happened, lots of progress. I think people seem to forget the amount of work that is done by the agency on, I have to say, a pretty restricted budget. If you're looking for highlights, we had a new code agreed by the world, and in particular by the athletes in Johannesburg in 2013. And over the last 18 months, practically everybody in the anti-doping movement, whether it's a federation or a government, is compliant. They have rules in place. They understand the change in legislation from the agency, and let's hope that really seriously improves all their efforts.
You've of course been involved with WADA since its inception. How far do you think anti-doping and indeed the organisation has come in that time?
Well, when you look back at the original battle, was to get a document which harmonised sanctions. And 2 or 3 federations at that time were very reluctant to agree to a harmonised sanction, which effectively was 2 years for a serious offence. Now the sophistication of the sanctioning process, when 2 years was clearly the limit that you could reach all these years ago, and public opinion has moved so that serious offenders will be sanctioned for 4 years. Now that public opinion just didn't move that way by accident. It moved that way because there was a constant debate, and WADA was part of that constant debate. When you look at the amount of investment that has been made over the years in scientific research, I mean, we're up close to $70 million over the WADA's life. When we have much, much better testing procedures, when we have much better tests on prohibited substances, more athletes are being caught. I think too, finally, the most recent change in philosophy, that instead of continually talking about the fight against doping in sport, but you know, when you're always being negative and you're always fighting, I think an assertion that we're trying to protect clean athletes is understood very clearly, and that goes down very well with the sports community, and I hope with the governments.
Indeed, you speak more and more about the need to protect clean athletes and move away from this fighting a war on doping. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by this?
It's a bit like having a political referendum. It's much more fun to vote yes than it is to vote no. If you're talking about a fight and everybody says you're never going to win that fight, then why would people take you seriously? If you turn around and say we are going to do everything we can so that at every major sports event, people who are watching sport and who love sport understand that the athletes taking part are clean and are not doping, then I think that is a much, much happier situation to be in.
One area of focus has been research, anti-doping research, and ensuring you get the backing from both the sports side and government. How pleased have you been to have had that backing from the public authorities as well?
Well, it came originally from the Thomas Bach's original offer of a $10 million fund to be matched by governments, and governments have come forward with somewhere around $6 million. So of the 10 million, we get 6, so there is a fund of somewhere over $12 million for what is hoped to be athlete-driven and new and exciting forms of research. If you speak to the scientists, they will tell you that all research is a good thing by definition. I use the word it should be innovative research, and they say all research is innovative. We need to find new methods. We need to find better ways of doing this, to see if we can make it faster, to see if we can make it cheaper, to see if we can make it more effective. And to be able to go into that programme with the backing of the $12 million fund is helpful. Governments have been strong supporters. The arrangements that we have with the PCC in the United States could be an additional string to that bow, where again more money is being invested in this particularly important area.
Before you began your career in sports administration, you were a competitive badminton player. Where did that love of the sport first come from?
Wow, my parents. And in primary school in the west of Scotland, I came under the influence of a splendid junior headmaster called Bob Johnson. He was a keen badminton player, so I learned from him. I went to university in 1959, and Glasgow University's men's badminton team was in the 5th division. And by the time we finished, we'd moved up from 5th to 1st, and we stayed there. Actually, staying in the 1st division was great. So the sheer joy of playing that kind of competitive sport was terrific. And I was then tempted or conned into the administrative side when quite clearly I was never going to be a world beater. And it's been great fun taking a National Badminton Association up the scale, taking the International Federation up the scale, putting the sport in the Olympic programme, and the rest, as they say, is history.
You're a former president of the International Badminton Federation. You're a vice president of the International Olympic Committee. You're a chairman of the British Olympic Association, and you received a knighthood in 2006. Amongst these accolades, which is the highlight?
Oh, wow. There are lots of magic moments. I would probably, if pressed, and I have this terrible feeling that you're going to, if I had to put down 2 or 3, one of the first would be actually getting the sport into the Olympic programme. Secondly, watching a young lady called Susi Susanti, who lived in Tasikmalaya in Indonesia. She came from the 4th biggest country in the world, and she won her country's first ever gold medal in the Barcelona Olympic Games. I mean, that was really terrific. I suppose listening to Jacques Rogge open the envelope and saying that the winner was London. And then, and this is a very personal one, to be sitting in the stadium at the very end of the closing ceremony of the London Olympic Games when Seb Coe, our chairman, said, "And when it was our turn, we did it right." Spot on.
Having been involved in sport for many years, when did you first become aware of the doping issue?
I suppose we read about it. I mean, badminton, the racket sports, I suspect, are, if there is a science of doping, are actually quite difficult. What do you take if you're a badminton player? Badminton is all about speed of foot, speed of hand, speed of eye, speed of thought. I mean, what enhances any one of these assets? I certainly was aware once, on a personal basis, that the president of the Indonesian Badminton Association, when I had to remonstrate with him because one of his athletes had tested positive at a major event in England, and I found out that his son had died of drug overdose. So when that happens with a friend, you begin to think, well, this is really serious. So that, I think, would be my first experience in the early 80s.
You're a self-described glass half full man. Is that something you carried with you throughout life?
I think so. I've always thought that it would be more fun to be successful. I don't think you should sit back and be very suspicious. I don't think we can manage to do that. I think if you're open and you like people and you try to be positive, your life is fuller and more enjoyable, rather than being suspicious and sitting back and wondering whether you should do this or whether you should do something else. I think you miss a great deal of joy in life.
At the moment, there are a number of challenges in anti-doping. There's an independent commission underway to look into allegations that were surfaced in the media last year. There's constant issues with steroids and supplements, and indeed, as you alluded to, the issue creeping into the wider society, not just elite sport. What are the main challenges for you?
Well, we have to complete the independent commission report. We were asked to do that by a number of other national anti-doping organisations. We are not alone in concerns. There are other international federations which have either run their own independent report or have specific issues that they need to be involved in. So from a purely sporting point of view, those are the priority issues at the moment. Secondly, it's whether we are capable of keeping up with current trends, whether we are able to deal with the very smart advisors to athletes to persuade them to dope and to do things which are more difficult to detect. We must also be concerned with countries where winning a major sports event results in a prize of such huge importance that people persuade the athletes to dope. There's a whole range of issues here. It's almost inevitable in this business that they will happen all the time. I think you have to address them, you have to take them on, you have to try to knock them off one after the other, and that's what I think this agency does.
There are a number of other positive initiatives that WADA and the anti-doping community are focusing on, one of which is education. How important is education?
Well, at the end of the day, if we can't persuade young people around the world that they shouldn't become involved in any doping practices, we're not going to win this. The agency, I think, has been very good at producing good educational materials. The challenge is to get them examined, whether it's on digital media or whatever, and get them understood and used. And I've always thought that education seemed to be a pretty competitive area of activity. You know, a national program might be better than an international program. So I've always thought that at the end of the day, any organised country which took sport seriously might just slide a little bit of anti-doping information into the PE criteria. And if they did that, that would be marvellous. But it's a challenge for an international organisation like WADA to persuade individual countries to change the curriculum that they have in their countries. But we shouldn't walk away from it.
So looking at education, preventative education, encouraging those of the future generations, the athletes of tomorrow, not to dope. That's the message.
For sure. We do it, I think, very effectively when young people get together at competitions. You know, we have our outreach program, the Outreach WADA booth is always stuffed full of young people coming and learning the anti-doping message. But I mean, in terms of population of young people in the world, we really are only scratching the surface. We're getting the best young athletes. Let's hope that what we do there has a knockdown effect. Let's hope that they go back and say to their friends, no, don't do it. And it's an attractive program to do. But as I said, worldwide and in totality, other people to help would make it much easier.
The cynics amongst us would say doping will never go away. What do you say to these people?
Well, yes, they're cynical. There is temptation across the board in many aspects of human activity. This is only one. Our job is, having identified and clearly identified that there is a risk to the whole ethos of sport here, we must accept that, and we must continue to narrow that risk and confront that risk all the time. The world is an inventive place. People come up with all sorts of new ideas. We have to deal with it, and we will.
You mentioned when you became WADA president, this would be your last big role in sport. Do you, 18 months on, still stand by that assertion?
Oh, I think so. No, I will finish my role as a Vice President of the IOC at the Rio Games, and it's been a wonderful period on the IOC because it covered the London Games, it's covered all sorts of changes within the IOC, so it's been a good time to hold a position like that. No, thereafter I would want to complete my WADA responsibilities and then move on and try to encourage other people to do the same.
Looking ahead, what are your key priorities for the next year or two?
I want to see the wish that many of our stakeholders have expressed, that having written a new code, we now try to make sure that everybody not only adheres to it, but tries to make their anti-doping efforts better. So I think the independent compliance group that we have established have a big part to play in that. I mean, I don't want people to say, oh yes, we've written a set of rules schools, we've ticked the box, we're WADA compliant, we don't need to worry about it. We need them to be more efficient. We need national anti-doping organisations to be efficient, and we need the international sports federations to be efficient. That's one thing. At the top end of sport with the international federations, I want them all to begin to look at the technical document on specific sport analysis. Let's test athletes for the substances which are most likely to be abused in their sport. Let's make their testing distribution plans and their systems more efficient, and that, I think, should help their compliance. So if we do all of that and we continue to improve the quality of service from our laboratories and everything else we have to do, then we'll have done fine.
When you eventually hang up your boots, what would you like your WADA presidency to be known for?
Oh, wow. A continuation of the efforts from distinguished people who did this before me, a recognition by all our stakeholders that the efforts are well worthwhile and they have been as successful as we can make them. And if we are in a better place when I finish than we were when we started, then that's fine. Trying to look ahead and quantify that at the moment, as soon as I do that, something else will happen, will prove that that's probably silly. But that's the best I can do at the moment.
Sir Craig Reedie, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Ben.